In the depths of the mysterious and ancient empire of Kalios, amidst its vast lands, spreads a forest shrouded in darkness and secrets. This forest was no ordinary place. It held more than ancient trees and dark paths. Among the rustling leaves and mysterious sounds of the night lurked creatures that embodied the worst nightmares. The ferocious monsters that inhabit these depths have become the heroes of many legends and legends passed down from generation to generation by the inhabitants of Kalios. These stories, full of vivid and exciting details of encounters with fantastic creatures, served more than just a means of entertainment. They served a much more important function: the education and upbringing of young people. Parents and elders used stories of the dark forest as cautionary tales, intending to instill in their children respect and fear of the unknown by teaching them to avoid these dangerous places. These narratives brought to life in the imagination of young listeners pictures of dangerous adventures, where the line between reality and fiction became almost indistinguishable. Despite the frightening nature of these tales, adults generally regarded them with distrust and skepticism. For many, they were nothing more than folk tales created to tame the violent spirits of the young and inexperienced. However, despite their outward indifference, these stories reinforced in the hearts and minds of all listeners an invisible connection to the ancient traditions and culture of Kalios, emphasizing the importance of respect for nature and its unknowable mysteries. In the heart of the endless night, under the starry sky, the young Duke of Hickel was in a state of deep concentration and peace, gazing humbly into the flames of the fire. In this fire, as in an alchemical crucible, something great and mysterious was maturing, a treasure whose importance transcended all possible perceptions. It was a moment filled with the anticipation of a miracle, when time seemed frozen and the air filled with magic. As the last flames turned to smoldering embers, the climax came. The magic stone was extracted from the charred remains of the fire. This act was no mere achievement or discovery. It symbolized a deep connection between the human world and the ancient forces that mysteriously control the destinies of empires and nations. The magical stone, shrouded in faint light and energy, was the result not only of a physical process, but also of a magical transformation possible only by observing ancient rituals and spells. Immediately afterward, without wasting a moment, the young Duke Hickel, whose heart was filled with pride and responsibility, climbed onto the back of his faithful horse, the Lodge. His act was full of determination and purpose. At that moment he was not just leaving the site of the ritual, he was leaving, carrying with him knowledge and power sufficient to protect his people and the entire empire from hidden threats. The Hickel family has been keepers of secrets and protectors of the empire from dark forces for centuries. They were the only ones who knew of the existence of monsters threatening the human world from the depths of the dark forest. This knowledge and duty was passed down from generation to generation, making them not just rulers but protectors, standing guard over peace and order. At the very heart of the Hickel family lurked an extraordinary power and purpose that had defined their life path for generations. This family was known for their indomitable passion and unwavering determination in hunting demons through their blood, guarding the world from the dark forces that threatened the order and security of the empire. And in this unbroken lineage, young Aslan Hickel stood out as a particularly powerful defender, whose skill and fortitude were unrivaled. The power flowing through Aslan's veins was so great that demon hunting itself, which for many was a test of strength, courage, and endurance, seemed to him no more than a routine activity. His incredible abilities and demon hunter instincts made every encounter with dark entities a boring and predictable ordeal, in which the outcome was known in advance. Such extraordinary power and confidence in his abilities made Aslan wonder about the limits of his skill, and whether there was a creature or task in this world that could truly test his abilities to the limit. This extraordinary strength and self-confidence gave Aslan a deep sense of steadfastness and faith in his destiny. He was convinced that his path was not just to hunt demons like his ancestors, but to search for deeper meaning and challenges that could unlock the full potential in his blood. Deep down, young Aslan felt that his true purpose had yet to be discovered, and that somewhere, beyond the known, challenges worthy of his strength awaited him. The moment the silence enveloped the forest, broken only by a barely perceptible rustle of unknown origin, Aslan found himself on full alert. His senses, sharpened by years of experience, instantly put him on high alert. He knew that these lands harbored many dangers, not the least of which were the mysterious creatures that dwelled in the depths of the dark, dense forest. But this time, as he carefully walked around the source of the noise, trying not to attract the attention of potential threats, his gaze fell on something unexpected. Amidst the dense green of the bushes, where the last rays of the sun barely broke through the dense crown of trees, Aslan noticed something completely uncharacteristic of this place. It was a human hand. Cautiously moving closer, he found that a girl about his age had come into view. Her presence in these remote, dangerous corners of the forest seemed something incredible, almost fantastic. After all, according to the unchangeable rules, only soldiers, brave and trained to survive in the most difficult conditions, could be here, deep in the forest thickets. Her presence brought an element of surprise to the established order of things, making him think about many things that seemed immutable. But here before Aslan stood a creature far from the image of a battle-hardened warrior. The girl whom fate had brought to this dangerous place was both a mystery and a challenge to everything he knew about the laws of these dark lands. This moment was the beginning of something new and completely unpredictable in Aslan's life. The meeting with this girl promised to lead him on a path full of dangers, discoveries, and perhaps the key to understanding what really lurks in the depths of this mysterious forest. 5 years after that unexpected turn in her life that made everyone wonder about the unpredictability of fate, Roel found herself sitting in a carriage that was rapidly carrying her towards a new, unknown life. She sat cradling her bag as a symbol of all the few personal things she could take with her at this crucial moment. The bag seemed an awkward reminder of how little control she had over her destiny. On the eve of her departure, her mother, as if anticipating the importance of the moment, admonished her to do everything possible and impossible to make the most of the chance. Roel was being sent off to face a future she hadn't chosen. The consent to marriage given by her family effectively meant she was sold. A bride became a bride not by love, not by her own desire, but as a result of a deal made by her relatives. This exchange of promises and agreements robbed her of the opportunity to know the man with whom she was to link her life. The only thing Roel had heard about her future spouse were rumors that didn't promise anything good. They said he was a cripple, a man whose face she couldn't even see, but to whom she already belonged. All of this created a feeling of deep unease and uncertainty in Roel's soul about what lay ahead, especially because of the rumors that all dukes were vampires. Traveling in a carriage symbolized not only physical movement from one point to another, but also the transition from one stage of life to another, leaving behind her familiar world forever and entering a whole new reality where she was to find her place. As the carriage continued on its way, a sharp gust of wind made Roel involuntarily shudder, as if it were a harbinger of the changes that were looming over her destiny. Noticing her nervous state, one of the guards accompanying her on this long journey tried to cheer her up by informing her that they were entering ducal territory. These words, meant to reassure, however, only increased the anxiety swarming in the depths of her heart. Roel's thoughts were far from the current moment, shrouded in a fog of uncertainty and fear of what was to come. The Camus forest, through which their route passed, was the site of many mysterious disappearances. Legends and tales of people lost among its gloomy thickets for no apparent reason were well known to Roel. In her imagination, the forest took on an increasingly sinister shape, embodying all the fears and warnings that could ever visit the human mind. With each step that brought them closer to this place, Roel's confidence that the legends of the monsters that inhabited the forest were not unfounded only grew stronger. This fear of the unknown, in the face of unknowable apprehension, became more and more palpable. With every meter she traveled, every moment that brought her closer to her new life, Roel's anxiety only deepened. In her imagination, the Camus forest was no longer just a place on a map, but a symbol of all the fears and uncertainties she would face in her new life. At an unexpected moment, when the way seemed calm and serene, the carriage suddenly made a sudden leap, as if picked up by an invisible hand. This unexpected maneuver caused real chaos inside, breaking the silence of an already tedious journey. At this critical moment, the guard who was accompanying Roel showed great reaction and rushed towards her with lightning speed to form a human shield with his body. His actions were driven by the instinct of a protector, willing to do anything for the safety of his ward. When the carriage finally came to a stop after his unexpected acrobatic act, finding itself upside down, the guard didn't hesitate for a second. He climbed outward from the overturned vehicle, leaving Roel in the relative safety of the inside. Outside, a tense atmosphere of anticipation and uncertainty enveloped him. The guard ordered Roel to stay inside, making it clear that she could face nothing less than a mortal threat outside. His voice was resolute, unapologetic, for he had the girl's safety at the top of his priority list. The atmosphere around him was tense, and into this silence a menacing growl rang out like thunder. That sound, full of rage and hunger, could only belong to one creature, a mountain monster whose fame and terrible deeds were known far beyond these lands. That growl made my heart freeze with fear, and the air around me seemed filled with the anticipation of an imminent battle. Amidst the tension and chaos of the events that followed, while Roel's heart was still trembling from the ordeal, something happened that brought calm to the maelstrom of her thoughts. A light, subtle squint, like the breeze of a summer evening, gently pushed back the strand of hair that hid her face. The gesture, filled with care and ease, belonged to Aslan, the man whose appearance at such a moment was a complete surprise to Roel. Her surprise at the fact that Aslan knew her was so great that it was as if time had stopped all around her. Aslan, sensing the excitement gripping Roel and wanting to lessen the distance between them, made a decision full of grandeur and respect. He went down on one knee before her, as is customary as a sign of the deepest reverence and seriousness of intent. This act was no mere formality. It was an expression of his inner peace, a show of respect, and a sign that there was a bond between them that she may not have even realized existed. At that moment, Aslan formally introduced himself to Roel, as if opening a new page in the book of their relationship. Aslan's gesture not only surprised Roel, but added new shades to the swirl of her emotions. A mixture of surprise, reverence, and perhaps even the beginning of trust in this unexpected protector. He became a beacon of sorts in the fog of uncertainty, heralding the possibility of a new alliance or even friendship in the face of impending trials. As if from a fog, tearing away the veils of vagueness and confusing images, a sense of reality returned to Roel. It was thanks to the voice of the guardian, sounding like an anchor bringing her back to the world of the living after a brief but profound suspension. Consciousness, which had seemed lost to her in the chaos of events, became clear again, and she felt herself coming back to herself, as if awakening from a deep and restless sleep. The guard, standing by her side like a pillar of support and security, brought news that overturned her view of what had happened. He told them that their carriage had been attacked by a mountain beast, a creature that Roel knew of only through legends and stories, never imagining that she would come face to face with it. Moreover, the guard emphasized that if not for Aslan's timely and decisive help, the outcome of this meeting could have been completely different, and it is unlikely that they would have been able to avoid a tragic ending. Roel was stunned. Surprise and disbelief mingled in her mind. All the moments she had experienced, which had seemed to her only a vivid dream, turned out to be a cruel reality. She couldn't understand how and when her consciousness had left her so much that she hadn't noticed how she had blacked out from reality, even for a moment losing the thread of events that connected her to the world. This realization not only heightened her sense of wonder and gratitude to Aslan for his unexpected intervention, but also raised questions about her own vulnerability and what other trials lay ahead on their journey. Roel, still under the impression of recent events, let her gaze wander over the surrounding landscape as her thoughts revolved unstoppably around one face, Aslan. Unlike expected, Aslan turned out to be not just a brave man, ready for risky actions to save others, but also an extremely attractive man, whose appearance was far from the pictures that were painted by imagination, fed only by rumors. His appearance, combining strength and nobility, unexpectedly caused confusion and excitement in Roel, leaving a warm mark in her soul. Trying to hide the excitement that suddenly overwhelmed her, Roel asked the guard about Aslan's whereabouts, hoping perhaps for a brief meeting, or at least a chance to express her gratitude. In response, however, she learned that Aslan had already left their company, plunging once more into the dangers that lurked in the surrounding lands. The guard reported that Aslan had gone to deal with other beasts that might pose a threat to their journey. This news left Roel with mixed feelings. On the one hand, she admired his selfless heroism. On the other hand, she felt a slight disappointment that she would not be able to personally convey the words of gratitude. While the conversation flowed in its own thread, the carriage undoubtedly continued its journey through the winding roads, bringing the passengers closer to their cherished goal, the castle of the Duchy of Hickel. The castle's huge gates already loomed on the horizon, towering over the surrounding countryside like a majestic symbol of power and security. The approach to the castle marked not only the end of their difficult journey, but also the beginning of a new chapter in Roel's life, full of unpredictable events and meetings, among which the meeting with Aslan remained one of the most mysterious and significant. The grandeur and vastness of the castle grounds stunned Roel with their scale when she first set foot on its grounds. She was struck not only by the size, but by the sudden austerity that hung in the air. Her musings were abruptly interrupted by a sudden stern voice that sounded so harsh it made her heart beat faster with surprise and slight fear. This voice belonged to a madam known for her rigid methods of training soldiers. She was sternly directing the drills, not tolerating any laziness or sluggishness among her charges. Madame didn't just train soldiers, she educated them through rigor and discipline, not giving the slightest chance for error or weakness. Anyone who didn't meet her high standards instantly felt the weight of her displeasure. While Roel was trying to gather her thoughts after her sudden fright, Madame's attention was caught by the arrival of a carriage. Roel was already beginning to emerge from it, whose arrival seemed to be a sudden turn for Madame. Madame's stern gaze was now fixed on Roel, who seemed to have become the new center of her unyielding interest. At this moment, the air around the castle was saturated with anticipation, heralding the beginning of something new and unpredictable in Roel's life. Just as Roel began to step out of the carriage, an accident nearly caused her to fall onto the hard surface of the paving stones that covered the path to the castle. At this crucial moment, time seemed to slow its run as she, losing her balance, began to fall clumsily forward. But suddenly, she was saved by Madame suddenly appearing nearby, who deftly picked Roel up, preventing her from colliding with the cold pavement. This gesture of help from Madame was so unexpected that Roel was left confused, but immediately thanked her savior sincerely. Facing Madame's stern image, Roel could not hide her embarrassment. Her cheeks flushed slightly with sudden shame and gratitude at the same time. Madame's gaze was penetrating and evaluating, as if he could read every thought that flashed through Roel's mind at that moment. After this moment filled with tension and unexpected intimacy, the situation was diffused by the arrival of the butler. He, with the dignity befitting his status, introduced Roel as the daughter of Viscount Lintea. This performance astonished Madame, apparently because she had not expected her noble guest to look like this. This moment added a new facet to the relationship between Roel and Madame, foreshadowing the possible beginning of not only a formal, but also a personal understanding between them. Madame, standing in front of Roel, began to scrutinize her from head to foot, as if she were trying to unravel some mystery hidden behind the girl's appearance. Her gaze was so piercing and full of distrust that it seemed to penetrate the very essence of Roel. There was a flicker of bewilderment in her eyes, and she seemed unable to believe that she was facing the person whose arrival she had expected. This discovery produced a surge of anger in Madame that was so great that it seemed to pierce through her, causing a storm of emotion. Unable to contain this inner volcano, Madame suddenly exclaimed, unleashing her anger on Aslan, reproaching him for making too serious a mistake. Her words cut through the air, filling it with tension. It seemed that at that moment, she was ready to hurl a storm of reproach at anyone who was connected with this decision. But after the first wave of anger had passed, Madame was able to pull herself together and regain her usual calmness and judgment. Having calmed down, she ordered that Roel be brought to a decent appearance. Her words sounded like a verdict that was not to be discussed. Madame wanted Roel to have at least the appearance of someone worthy of being within these walls. This order carried with it not only a desire to see Roel in a more acceptable appearance for the castle, but also emphasized Madame's strictness to order and discipline, which she considered integral to her world. Like a whirlwind, Roel was swept up in care and attention as she was directed to the bathtub, already filled with fragrant bubble bath where the warm water promised to transform her, not only externally, but internally as well. Around her, like bees around a flower, circled two maids, each of whom was determined to transform Roel so that she could not only fit into aristocratic circles, but also shine among them, becoming a girl worthy of attention and admiration. With every stroke of the comb, with every application of the fragrant oil, Roel was transformed. Her skin took on a delicate hue, her hair began to radiate a healthy luster, and her face reflected not only beauty, but also a subtle inner transformation that was taking place under the influence of care and attention. The maids worked with such skill and devotion that Roel could hardly recognize herself in the mirror that soon appeared before her. She was amazed at the transformation that had occurred not only to her appearance, but also to her sense of self. At this moment, while Roel was still immersed in her thoughts of her new look, the butler, always attentive and courteous, approached her with a question that was filled with genuine concern for her comfort and a desire to see her happy. He asked if she was happy with the resulting image, or if there was anything she should change. This gesture of attention and participation was not just a pleasant surprise to Roel, but a reminder that in this new world, her opinion mattered and her wants and needs would be considered. This man, with manners worthy of royalty, introduced himself to her as Danyan, the butler of the house. His voice was friendly, and his eyes were sincere and helpful. Roel, feeling excited and somewhat confused by everything going on around her, couldn't hide her feelings. With slight embarrassment, she turned to Danyan with a question that had been weighing on her mind. She wondered what her fate would be in this house, especially after she'd noticed that she felt she'd failed to win the Duchess's sympathy. Roel felt like she was on the edge of a precipice, ready to fall into an abyss of misunderstanding and rejection at any moment. However, Danyan, possessing not only an outward calmness, but also a deep understanding of the human soul, quickly sensed her anxiety and decided to dispel it. With unshakable confidence, he assured Roel that her anxiety was groundless. He explained that Madame, that is, the Duchess, did not really dislike her at all. On the contrary, her excitement was for entirely different reasons: concern for Roel's thinness, which indicated a deep compassion and desire to help. Thus, Danyan's words became a ray of light for Roel in the dark realm of her doubts. He not only allayed her fears, but helped her gain a new perspective on the Duchess's attitude toward her, opening the door to new possibilities and hopes in this mysterious and magnificent house. That day, Danyan, as butler of this majestic castle, decided to personally introduce Roel to its interior, corridors, and halls, each of which held stories of past centuries. Roel, the new occupant of the place, followed his every word carefully, trying to assimilate the route between halls and corridors, for she supposed that from the first she might be involved in the work, and then knowledge of every corner of the castle would prove invaluable. However, the excitement and constant tension reflected in her eyes did not go unnoticed by Danyan. He mistakenly interpreted these signs as fatigue after a long journey, and deciding to give her a chance to rest, offered to escort her to her new dwelling inside the castle walls. Upon entering the room that Danyan called her new home, Roel felt a wave of surprise and admiration. The spacious, high-ceilinged room, decorated with fine fabrics and expensive furniture, seemed to her like something quite unbelievable. She couldn't believe that such luxury was meant for her. She couldn't believe that such a luxury was meant for her. She thought that even her mother, the Viscountess, had never had such a luxury at her disposal. This room was like a room from a fairy tale, where every piece of the interior seemed to have been chosen with care and taste, making her feel that she was not just a guest of the story, but a part of it, a character from the story who was just beginning her magical journey in this world of mystery and riddles. As soon as Roel crossed the threshold of her new room, an indescribable sense of unease swept over her. Her heart beat faster, and the thought flashed through her mind that it was all just a dream, too good to be true. She pinched her arm in an attempt to return to reality, but the sharp pain only confirmed that what she was facing was not an illusion, but reality itself. Danyan, watching her reaction, felt a wave of unease. It seemed to him that the luxury of the room was not to Roel's liking, and now he was looking for ways to make her feel at home here. At this moment, Madame, a person of high status and respect in the castle, walked down the corridor. Her appearance was so unexpected that Roel, caught off guard, instantly sank into a bow at a loss for words. Madame's inner strength and authority had such an effect on her that she felt quite small and insignificant against the background of these majestic walls and the people who inhabited them. This moment was a test for Roel, as she felt the full weight of the responsibility and new duties that were placed upon her in this castle. At the same time, it was a reminder that every encounter and event within these walls would contribute to her personal growth and transformation. Madame, standing in front of Roel, enveloped the room for a moment in an aura of tension. Her eyes, piercing and unyielding, gazed into the girl with such intensity that she seemed able to read every page of her soul. With a demanding tone that tolerated no objection, she demanded that Roel confess her real age. The answer of the girl, who confessed her 16 years of age, struck Madame to the heart. The shock of being confronted by an adolescent, who to her eyes looked much younger than her years, was reflected on her face by a fleeting grimace of surprise. Roel, feeling the mounting pressure of the moment, hastily began to apologize, as if trying to escape any possible punishment for her careless youth. Her body involuntarily clenched at every gesture from Madame, as if expecting an unpredictable reaction. Suddenly, however, Madame showed unexpected gentleness by grabbing Roel's cheeks. This action, though unexpected, carried care and understanding. By inquiring about Roel's desire for food, Madame showed that her strict exterior concealed a warmth and concern for the ward. This moment was a turning point for Roel, who for the first time felt visible and important in this huge castle. On the one hand, she felt the weight of authority and the strictness of the rules Madame followed, and on the other hand, the tenderness and care that could be found even in the strictest of guises. At the moment when Roel, standing before Madame, confessed with some embarrassment in her voice that her appetite had completely deserted her, the room was filled with Madame's heavy gaze. Not wanting to leave her guest without proper attention, she instantly gave Danyan orders to make sure Roel was fed. As if by magic, in just a few seconds Roel saw the splendor of culinary art. A table bursting with a variety of dishes, each of which could be considered a masterpiece. Madame, sitting next to her, began to question Roel about possible allergies and her cooking preferences, trying to show her genuine concern and hospitality. Roel, however, remaining in her embarrassment, only awkwardly admitted that she had no particular preference. This moment, filled with caring yet awkward communication, revealed a deep humanity in the relationship between the characters, showing how attention and care can manifest in the most unexpected circumstances. In that secluded corner of the world where the Linty mansion spread out, Roel felt like a stranger. The long days spent in a strict regimen where hunger was almost a daily companion had left a deep mark in her heart. The table in front of her, lavishly laden with a variety of dishes, seemed not just a luxury, but a test, requiring a special mental strength to cope with the inner demons of the past. Madame looked at Roel with doubt and a certain heaviness in her gaze, as if trying to penetrate into the depths of her soul and understand what lurked there. There was a note of encouragement in her voice as she reminded Roel that she could start the meal. At these words, Roel, as if finding a forgotten courage, proceeded to the first course, the soup, which, to her own surprise, caused her involuntary confusion. The flavor of the dish was so exquisite and unfamiliar to her depleted palate that she couldn't hide her surprise and joy at what she experienced. Madame, watching Roel, did not hide her amazement. It was a moment when the simple act of eating became a bridge between two very different worlds, the worlds of hostess and guest. Roel, blushing and feeling Madame's eyes on her, confessed embarrassedly that she had never before encountered something so exquisite and delicious in her path. This recognition was more than just words of gratitude. It was an expression of deep emotion, a testament to how unexpectedly people's fates can intertwine, and how simple gestures of attention and care can ignite light in hearts long hidden in the shadows. After Roel shared her impressions of the dish she had consumed, the atmosphere in the room changed noticeably. Madame, whose face until that moment had reflected compassion and understanding, suddenly tensed as if Roel's words had touched a tender string in her heart. Without the slightest hesitation, she summoned a maid, urgently ordering her to bring another pot of soup. This act was so unexpected to Roel that she could not conceal her surprise. For her, accustomed to scarcity and restrictions, such generosity was hard to understand. As Roel returned to her room that evening, Mixed feelings enveloped her. On the one hand, she was grateful for the attention and care shown to her, but on the other hand, she felt physically uncomfortable from overeating. For a long time she had lived in an environment where every piece of food was worth its weight in gold. And now, after such abundance, her body was reacting with rejection. Madame, probably in her desire to support and warm Roel, overreached in her desire to fill the void in her life through food, with the exact opposite result. It was hard for Roel to realize that such a show of concern made her nauseous, for she had not been used to such an abundance of food in a long time. The evening was a moment of reflection for Roel, not only on her physical condition, but also on the complexity of human relationships, where even the best intentions can lead to unexpected consequences. Madame was amazed at how quickly Roel was sated. Her defeat was so obvious that it seemed material, hanging in the air between them. Roel, for her part, realizing the depth of care she was receiving in this castle, decreed that she must adapt to her new living conditions, including a more plentiful diet. The old experience when her days were spent on a straw bed, and any sign of fatigue or weakness could result in severe punishment, seemed to be a thing of the past. During those years of abuse and deprivation, Roel faced ongoing challenges. One such ordeal occurred when, tired of cleaning her mother's room, she dozed off from exhaustion. That moment of weakness had cost her a cruel punishment, the memory of which remained in her mind as a reminder of how cruel life can be. Now, being in a castle where she was treated with such care and attention, Roel sometimes caught herself thinking that this was just a dream from which she was to awaken. She could not believe that her life had changed so radically. Instead of a straw bed, she had a soft bed, and instead of punishment for any slightest sign of fatigue or weakness, she had care and attention. This contrast between past and present was so great that Roel had to convince herself daily of the reality of what was happening. A sense of gratitude settled in her heart for the care and warmth that now surrounded her, and she promised herself that she would find a way to respond to that care by learning to accept and appreciate the new way of life she had been given. In the back of her mind, Roel was seized with fear of losing the shelter and refuge that Madame had provided her. All these feelings raged within her, despite the apparent kindness and hospitality of the lady of the house. Roel decided to show her usefulness to the castle, which she thought might convince Madame of her indispensability. Suddenly she walked over to the couch, which seemed a more appropriate resting place than a bed. His rigidity, contrary to expectations, seemed more familiar and cozy to Roel, reminding her of simple conditions from the past. That was why, without the slightest hesitation, she settled on it to sleep. This act was not just a search for physical comfort, but a demonstration of her willingness to adapt to any conditions, as long as she remained part of the castle life. At this moment, as Roel sank into slumber on the hard couch, she may not have realized, but by her unassuming choice of resting place, she had sent a quiet but powerful signal to Madame and the entire house. She not only seeks refuge, but is willing to contribute to the life of the castle, proving herself useful and indispensable with every action she takes, even something as simple as choosing a place to sleep. As soon as the first rays of morning light touched Roel's eyelids, she was instantly awakened from a sleep that, despite the unusual resting place, proved to be deep and restorative. Her morning awakening, however, had not been peaceful. Roel's head felt heavy, like it was filled with lead, and the sudden realization that the sun had already risen far below the horizon sent a wave of panic through her. Her heart hammered more frequently, and she hurried to her bed, frantically trying to get it in order. There was only one thought running through her mind. She had been too relaxed and had allowed herself to abuse Madame's hospitality, forgetting her proper behavior and duties. At this moment, the tense silence was broken by the appearance of Madame herself, who seemed disturbed at seeing Roel's occupation. The girl's heart sank in anticipation of displeasure or even reproach, for she had broken the established order and routine. Roel, feeling the burden of guilt, immediately began apologizing for her late rise, expecting her act to be met with strictness. Madame's reaction, however, was quite different. Instead of the expected irritation or displeasure, a smile played on her face. Madame came up to Roel and stroked her head affectionately, and spoke words filled with warmth and understanding. She assured Roel that she was awake in good time as if she wanted to relieve her of the weight of unnecessary worry. The gesture and Madame's words were like a balm to Roel's soul, freeing her from the agonizing guilt and fear of being misunderstood. Madame's moment of care and understanding was a reminder to Roel that she had found not just a refuge, but a place where she was valued and understood, even when she herself did not believe she mattered. As the new day dawned, Madame turned to Roel with a message that brought excitement to their morning routine. With words full of anticipation and importance, she announced that they had a day full of things in front of them, namely a day for shopping. This statement awakened a mixture of excitement and curiosity in Roel, for such a turn of events was a surprise to her. Later, when they arrived in town, their first stop was a local atelier, known for its quality and unique approach to clothing creation. Entering the atelier, they were warmly welcomed by its owner, who greeted Madame with joy and respect. Apparently, they had known each other for years, and each meeting was a special occasion for them. However, when Madame announced that their visit involved buying clothes not for herself, but for Roel, it caused the mistress of the atelier to be surprised. Her gaze flicked to Roel, in whom she probably saw more than just a casual visitor. Roel, for her part, was stunned by this turn of events. Standing in the atelier, surrounded by exquisite fabrics and sample garments, she felt part of something magical and incredible. This moment was a reminder to her of how unexpectedly life can change, and how unusual twists of fate can lead to the most unexpected and joyful events. Madame, with ease of character and clearness of purpose, declared that the clothes prepared for Roel were not the right size, for Roel was much more graceful and petite than had been supposed. This unexpected discovery prompted her to decide to visit an atelier, where the seamstress's skill and creativity were to be realized in the creation of unique outfits. As soon as she finished speaking, Roel was instantly the center of attention of the female employees. She was surrounded by maids, who with professional dexterity and care began to take measurements, immersing the girl in the world of high fashion and individual approach. Madame, with her undeniable taste and sense of style, was actively involved in the process, providing valuable guidance on the choice of fabrics, which were meant to caress Roel's skin and emphasize her natural beauty, and the design of the dresses, striving to create looks capable of surprising and enchanting at any event. This tandem of desire and professionalism resulted in a delightful collection of outfits for Roel, each one the epitome of sophistication and elegance. The result of the atelier's work exceeded all expectations, delighting even the owner of the atelier, who has undoubtedly witnessed and created many masterpieces. However, the uniqueness and perfection of Roel's outfits inspired her more than ever, proving that true beauty requires individualization and attention to detail. Madame and Roel, in their magnificent unity and mutual understanding, appeared before the world as if they were not just close people, but sisters, united not by blood ties, but by the similarity of souls and views of the world. As they looked at the results of the atelier's labors, surrounded by care and attention, Roel could not refrain from praising the amazing beauty of the clothes, which seemed to have been created under the influence of magic. Madame, however, with an ease and grace that was peculiar to her, emphasized that the true beauty of the garment was revealed by Roel's. This certainly made the latter blush with embarrassment and modesty, for such an acknowledgement from Madame was to her an exceptional praise. When it was time to leave the atelier, the maids carefully and with great respect carried the many boxes of clothes into the carriage, each one full of promises of new experiences and joyous moments for Roel. But Madame, possessing an insatiable desire for perfection and a desire to surround Roel with all the best, deemed this crop of fashionable creations insufficient. She announced her intention to invite the famous designer directly from the capital to create even more exquisite and exclusive dresses, showing her boundless care and attention to Roel. Without giving Roel even a moment to think or recover from the excitement caused by such tokens of attention, Madame, like a whirlwind filled with determination and energy, dragged her to the new store. This act was not just a manifestation of a desire to adorn Roel with new outfits, but a symbol of deep affection and a desire to do everything possible to make Roel feel special and loved. This moment was a vivid testament to their special bond, where Madame acted not only as a patroness, but also as a loyal friend, willing to do anything for Roel's happiness. On their next adventure, The jewelry store was the scene of a new episode in their day together. Among the glitter of precious stones and metals, Roel felt like she was in a fairy tale, where every object seemed to be part of the magic. Her gaze involuntarily stopped on the elegant jewelry that sparkled and beckoned with its beauty. Madame, noticing Roel's interest, decided to turn her dreams into reality by offering to give her a few of these delightful pieces of jewelry. To Roel, however, such a gesture seemed excessive. She was overwhelmed by Madame's generosity, but at the same time felt that such luxury was too out of reach for her. The situation took an unexpected turn when Madame, misinterpreting Roel's hesitation as dissatisfaction with the quality of the goods, burst out and expressed her resentment toward the salesman. This moment was a test for Roel, who was in a quandary, wishing at the same time not to offend Madame with her refusal and not to cause conflict with the salesman. With a sense of urgency to resolve the tense situation, Roel quickly assured Madame that all the jewelry was to her liking, and that her indecision was not due to a flaw in the merchandise. These words, spoken with sincerity and a desire to protect Madame's good intentions, instantly reassured her. Madame, whose heart was full of nothing but a desire to make Roel happy, accepted the explanation, and the situation was peacefully resolved. When Madame suggested a walk to another store, Roel suddenly froze, as if lost in her thoughts. Moments when she herself, young and inexperienced, had followed her mother around the boutiques, soaking up her elegance and taste, came to mind. It was as if those memories cut her off from the present, reminding her of how far she had traveled from those times. Seeing the change in the expression on Roel's face, Madame instantly realized that something was troubling the girl. As if reflecting the care of maternal feeling, Madame gently put her arm around her elbow, as if wishing to support her, trying to dispel the gloomy mood that enveloped them. In an instant, as if cutting the piece of the setting with a sharp knife, the image of the attack on the carriage in which Roel was in flashed into Madame's mind. With genuine concern in her voice, she turned to Roel to ask if the event had left dark traces of fear in her soul, and hastened to reassure her that Aslan, acting as protector of their lands, was already waging an unrelenting battle against the remaining creatures. These beasts, appearing not so often, should not have inspired fear, as if Madame was trying to convince not only Roel but herself of this. Madame's next question concerned the extent of Roel's familiarity with the history and culture of their duchy. The reply of Roel, who admitted her ignorance of these matters, rendered Madame speechless for a moment. In spite of her high position and education, Madame was embarrassed by such sincerity and simplicity. This moment was a testament not only to the differences in their knowledge and life experiences, but also showed the deep humanity inherent in both women, regardless of their social status. Madame, possessing the full measure of power and wisdom, felt an unexpected respect for the young girl whose life was so far removed from the palace intrigues and rich cultural life of the duchy. In one of the quiet, shrouded corners of the city, where stories weave as tightly as shadows in the twilight, Madame addressed Roel with a statement full of mystery. She expressed the idea that Roel's lack of understanding about the duchy had less to do with her personal level of education than with the very nature of the duchy. It was something that Roel herself was about to discover, but only after the return of Aslan, the key figure in the story, whose visit promised to unlock the veil of secrets. Without giving Roel time to think, Madame suddenly grabbed her arm and, like the wind, rushed forward. The announcement came from her lips that a restaurant worthy of their attention was not far away. It was done with such suddenness that Roel could hardly keep up with her rapid pace. This restaurant, according to Madame, is not just a place to eat, but another page in the book of their joint experiences, which may reveal new facets of the history of the duchy, so closely intertwined with the fate of Roel. Over the past 2 days, Roel, immersed in the atmosphere and events surrounding the Duchy of Hickel, had begun to gradually unravel the tangle of local secrets and rumors. She found that the dark veil of stories and warnings with which the duchy had been shrouded actually concealed something quite different. Most rumors, laden with dark colors and perceptions of Hickel as a place bleak and cruel, turned out to be exaggerations, if not complete fiction. The people Roel had met painted Madame as a cold and heartless ruler, but Roel's personal experience diverged radically from these stories. Madame had shown herself to be a true oasis of kindness and caring, becoming more than just an acquaintance or mentor to Roel. A deep emotional bond developed between them, reminiscent of maternal affection and filial affection. Such a comparison filled Roel's heart with warmth, but she suddenly realized that their bond could never grow into a true kinship. This moment of insight was so abrupt and unexpected that Roel even lost her physical sense of reality around her. A coin slipped out of her purse, as if symbolizing an elusive illusion. This small but significant moment was a reminder to Roel that not all connections in life can be explained or predicted, and that sometimes fate throws us challenges and lessons where we least expect them. As soon as the coin left the shelter of Roel's purse, it was suddenly pinned to the ground by the foot of a man whose appearance and aura evoked unmistakable associations with a gangster past. Meeting such a man brought an element of fear and uncertainty to Roel's soul, awakening in her a sense of vulnerability in the face of an unexpected threat. Her attempt to ask the man to release the coin was met with complete disregard, which only increased her anxiety and fear. The situation escalated dramatically when the man, ignoring Roel's request, not only refused to remove his foot, but aggressively grabbed her arm, accusing her of insolence. His grip was so strong that it caused Roel painful sensations, bringing her to tears. The moment, which seemed a harbinger of more danger, suddenly took an unexpected turn. At this critical moment, Madame, who had hitherto remained in the shadows, intervened with a determination and strength unbecoming an ordinary person. She grabbed her attacker's arm with such dexterity and skill that she dislocated it instantly, demonstrating not only her physical fitness, but also her indomitable will. Majestically and with complete composure, Madame introduced herself as Serena de Hickel, as if in this revelation lay a deep and significant truth that could change the course of events. This moment was not just a show of physical strength or defense of the weak. It was a display of unbreakable will and willingness to stand up for truth and justice, not allowing evil to prevail. Madame, the Siren de Hickel, appeared in this moment not only as Roel's protector, but also as a symbol of indomitable struggle against injustice, inspiring respect and admiration with her courage and determination. In an atmosphere of incandescent emotion, when the tension in the air became palpable, Madame, as if she were the embodiment of sternness and firmness, turned her gaze upon the man. That look, penetrating to the marrow of his bones, filled his heart with icy terror. Barely able to feel the wave of fear, the man found himself in midair, instantly moved by an invisible force, which the next moment ruthlessly sent him on a journey that ended in a collision with the once whole table. It now lay in the wreckage of the furniture, as if a reminder of the strength and determination of the defender. Madame, without wasting a second, transferred her implacable gaze to the man's companions. They, at first numb with terror, soon found the strength to retreat. Seeing that their capabilities were incomparable to the power of this woman, ready to be an unstoppable shield for Roel, they overcame their fear. Rallied by the unexpected defeat and the realization of the futility of further resistance, the cronies quickly picked up their defeated comrade. With each step moving farther away, their footsteps became more and more certain that the best solution was to leave the place, while fear and respect for Madame still kept them alive. And so, under the weight of circumstances, they chose to flee, leaving behind the broken table and the evidence of their defeat. No sooner had the echoing footsteps of the startled men dissolved into the air than Madame, as if the embodiment of protection and security, approached Roel gently. With a confidence that radiated calm and control, she assured Roel that the danger was over. These words, spoken with such unshakable confidence, were a balm to Roel's troubled and uncertain soul. In that moment, Roel realized that she must never show weakness or ingratitude to her protector, this embodiment of courage and determination. The idea of upsetting or offending this fearsome woman in any way seemed unthinkable to Roel. Madame, for her part, showing the care that was hidden behind her stern exterior, turned her attention to Roel's wrist. Her concerned gaze did not miss the fact that the girl's wrist was swollen, a clear sign that without immediate attention, the situation could only worsen. With unmistakable determination in her voice, Madame pointed out the need for an urgent return home to ensure that the injury was properly cared for. At the same time, Roel's stated missed opportunity to punish the men even more severely for their act, and the anxiety it caused sounded not only like regret for the restraint of her actions, but also like a quiet warning that her measure of retribution might not be so merciful in the future. This admission not only emphasized her determination to protect Roel at all costs, but also served as a reminder that the safety and well-being of her ward was Madame's absolute priority. In the days that followed, it was as if Roel's life had become a magical story, taken from the pages of an ancient book of fairy tales, where every moment was filled with something incredible and at the same time unaccustomedly beautiful. During this time, Roel's face even became more rounded and her skin healthier. However, despite all this extravaganza around, there was one small nuance that was making a difference to this idol. Madame, the owner of the house, continued to overfeed Roel with unwavering persistence. This seemingly carefree display of concern once turned into indigestion for Roel. It was an event that not only caused her unnecessary suffering, but also frightened Madame herself, causing her to reconsider her views on her ward's nutrition. Meanwhile, the servants of the house, who surrounded Roel with their attention and care, were pressing her to address them with a more commanding tone. It was really unusual for a girl raised as a servant, or worse. But despite her initial embarrassment and inner resistance, Roel gradually began to get used to the new rules of the game in this world of luxury and plenty. She learned to balance the need to be assertive in dealing with staff with maintaining her own kindness and sensitivity, which had always been her own. This process of adapting to life in an environment radically different from anything she had previously experienced was a real challenge for Roel, especially when she was secretly trying to sweep. But each new day brought not only challenges, but also new discoveries about herself and the world around her, allowing her with each step to dive deeper into this unusual, full of contrasts life, where each moment promised a new adventure and the opportunity to learn something new not only about the world, but also about herself. While cleaning, she was caught off guard when the maid once again noticed her diligence. With ease, but with unfailing respect, the maid took the broom from Roel's hands, explaining the action as a desire to keep for herself a job she valued and relied upon. This act was not done out of a desire to demean or limit Roel in her desire to help, but rather out of an understanding of the importance of everyone in the house and everyone's desire to fulfill their responsibilities. Not leaving Roel puzzled and eager to compensate for her desire to be helpful, the maid offered the alternative of visiting the training ground. The proposal put a new spin on their day, filling it with anticipation of something exciting and new. Together they made their way to the place where Madame usually trained knights, a creature from another world where strength and skill merge into a single dance of martial art. When they arrived, they found that despite the usually large number of knights practicing under Madame's careful guidance, today the ground seemed almost empty. The maid hastened to dispel any possible surprise Roel might have had by telling her that most of the knights had gone into the forest with the Duke and Aslan. This information added intrigue to their adventure, for the absence of the knights meant that the training ground appeared to them in a new light, offering an unusual peace and quiet instead of the usual clatter of steel and voices that filled it on ordinary days. The sudden moment when the knight, filled with deep respect, performed a bow towards Roel was the beginning of a chain reaction. As soon as he completed his gesture, the rest of the warriors immediately followed, as if confirming the general mood and admiration. This act of respect elicited a response from Roel. She greeted them, which in turn generated even more revelry among those gathered. This mutual exchange of courtesies, however, was so unexpected and powerful to Roel that she, overwhelmed with inner excitement and perhaps embarrassment, sought shelter behind the back of her faithful maid. Meanwhile, the knights did not relent, raising their voices in praise, declaring that it was their highest honor to be in the presence of Roel herself. They did not hide their delight and admiration until suddenly their emotional rush was interrupted. Sir Keplin, commander of Madame Siren's knightly troop, became the undeniable figure who managed to restore order among the warriors. His sudden intervention in the situation brought a sense of discipline and order to them, reminding them of the proper behavior and respect that should have been maintained at such a solemn moment. Kaplan, steadfast and determined, suddenly found that Roel felt a deep uneasiness. The knights, whose voices had unwittingly caused the alarm, realized their blunder, and in an effort to make amends, bowed apologetically. This gesture of modesty and respect, however, did not go unanswered. Roel, possessing incomparable kindness of heart, hastened to reassure her unwitting assailants, confessing that it was not they themselves who had alarmed her, but only the suddenness and loudness of their cries. Her words, filled with sincerity and lightness, caused a wave of admiration and emotion among those present. Kaplan, trying to change the tense situation to a more relaxed and informative one, offered Roel a small tour of the castle. As he enthusiastically described each corner of the castle, he dwelt on the training ground where the castle fighters, comparable in skill to imperial knights, honed their art. His stories were full of admiration and respect for the skill and strength of these warriors, whose bravery and skill were legendary. However, the idyllic picture of the peaceful excursion was suddenly marred. Roel suddenly felt a heavy and uncomfortable gaze on her, as if someone was watching her every move. This sense of discomfort suddenly broke the tranquility of the moment, leaving behind a feeling of unease and uncomfortableness. There seemed to be a premonition of something unknown and mysterious in the air, adding a note of intrigue and suspense to the story. The mysterious watcher, who until that moment had been hiding his presence in the shadows, suddenly, like a ghost dissolving into thin air, broke into a run. This unexpected gesture caused Roel a wave of surprise and bewilderment, for the peaceful afternoon had not presaged such swift and sudden movements. Before Roel could clarify the situation, share her worries, or even try to unravel the motives behind the observer's strange behavior, the air around her was filled with the deep and resonant sound of a bell. That sound, like a mighty wind, swept away all doubts and questions, replacing them with the anticipation of an important event. Kaplan, whose facial features reflected excitement and anticipation, hastened to explain the significance of the ringing. The bell announced the arrival of two distinguished guests, the Duke and Aslan, whose presence in the castle was not an ordinary event. Kaplan's words brought a storm of joy to Roel's soul. The arrival of such distinguished guests not only promised a change in the routine of the castle, but also heralded the beginning of something exciting and perhaps momentous. It was like a sudden gust of wind that brings with it the scent of distant wanderings and adventures, heralding the beginning of a new chapter in the history of the castle and its inhabitants. As the horses' hooves burrowed into the ground of the castle courtyard, and the sounds of their arrival echoed through the neighborhood, Roel's heart sang with joy and excitement. Her eyes, full of anticipation, feverishly ran through the rows of arriving knights in search of one single face, Aslan. In this sea of steel armor and blades shimmering in the sunlight, she sought him out like a beacon in a dark night. And so, as the troops lined the corridor, honoring the one who led them, all eyes turned to the Duke leading the procession. At that moment, Roel felt more than admiration. Before her eyes stood a man whose face was an exact replica of a statue in the capital, created more than 10 years ago. This discovery struck her to the core. How could a man remain unchanged for so long that even time seemed to leave no mark on him? An embrace of doubt and fear enveloped Roel tightly. The whispers of legends and rumors that the Duke was a vampire were suddenly no longer just distant echoes of urban lore. Now, facing the possible reality of these stories, she felt her heart sink with fear. And in a moment of acute emotional anxiety, as her mind struggled to find a logical explanation for what she saw, her lips involuntarily muttered aloud the very words that should have remained only a fleeting thought. "Are the rumors that the Duke is a vampire true?" Those words escaped her lips, hovering in the air like feathers released from a pillow, impossible to gather back. They dispersed amongst those present, leaving Roel in a state of deep confusion and awaiting the consequences of her rash confession. Following the Duke like a shadow, a young man whose face was covered by the shadow of a hood hurried from his horse. It was Aslan, whose gaze immediately found Roel among the crowd. His footsteps were determined, and as he approached the girl, there was concern and some worry in his eyes. Aslan feared that his mother, Madame, might have somehow offended or upset Roel during his absence. He was willing to stand up for her, even though there might be a possible conflict with her mother. Roel, however, hastened to allay his fears, assuring Aslan that Madame had treated her with genuine kindness and consideration. Her words were full of sincerity and gratitude, which could only strengthen Aslan's confidence in the rightness of his heart's choice. At that moment, as if by a magic sign, Madame appeared beside them. Her gaze on Aslan was stern and measured, as if she were assessing the situation, ready to intervene or give her opinion at any moment. It was a look that carried years of wisdom and the unwavering confidence of a mother's care and authority. Roel felt the weight of that gaze, knowing that Madame was not only concerned for her son's well-being, but was also watching, ready to support or protect at any moment. As Madame's soft embrace enveloped Roel, she shared memories of those carefree days when Aslan was far away and she and Roel could enjoy the peace and joys of life with warmth and peace in her voice. There was a note of nostalgia in those words for the times when their little world seemed like a whole universe filled with warmth and happiness. But this peace was suddenly broken when the Duke approached them with a look full of sternness and distrust. His eyes were literally boring into Roel, as if trying to unravel the mystery of her true nature through the veil of innocence and youth with which she was shrouded. Not believing his eyes that the girl of whom Aslan had told him so much was standing before him, the Duke remained unshaken in his disbelief. At that moment, the tension in the air became palpable, as if the very space around them was holding its breath in anticipation of the resolution of this conflict. Roel, feeling the weight of the stairs, gathering her strength and courage, introduced herself, as if trying to bridge the gap of misunderstanding between her own and the Duke's two worlds. However, this hardly mitigated his disbelief, but rather, on the contrary, as if it caused a flash of anger. The Duke's anger, dark and powerful as a storm, burst forth as he, unable to contain his emotions, grabbed Aslan by the chest. This action was full of determination and rage, as if all his accumulated resentment and rejection of the situation was concentrated in one gesture. The moment the Duke raised his voice at Aslan, soaked in anger and bewilderment, the maid slid beside him like a shadow, taking Roel's hand gently and leading her away from the scene of the quarrel. The place where the conflict had erupted was quickly left behind, replaced by quieter and more secluded corners. Meanwhile, Madame, who always possessed a fine intuition and the ability to sense a change in the air, noticed that the number of knights around had increased noticeably. This unusual and abrupt increase in guards brought to her mind something impending that demanded such attention. Linking this reinforcement to the monster's recent attack on Roel's carriage, Madame assumed that Aslan's order was behind it, which, however, did not confirm her speculation, leaving it unanswered. This silence caused a wave of irritation in Madame, for she was accustomed to openness and honesty in all matters. However, along with irritation, curiosity crept into her heart. She wondered why Aslan, usually so reserved and distant, was showing such unusual attention to Roel. Roel seemed to be completely unaware of all these maneuvers and relationships, which made the whole situation even more puzzling. Madame couldn't help thinking that behind Aslan's facade of calm and indifference lay a deep concern or even affection for Roel. It was so unlike Aslan that it raised even more unanswered questions. What is the reason for this behavior? What could have motivated him to take on the role of Roel's protector and guardian? And most importantly, what events led to this development in their relationship? In these reflections and speculations, Madame found a new interest that made her look differently at the events around her, searching for ulterior motives and unsolved mysteries. A few months ago, in a secluded room where the echo of footsteps was usually lost among the heavy drapes and the soft light of candelabra, an event occurred that was the beginning of an unpredictable change. Aslan, whose presence was always felt as something unchanging and monolithic, suddenly appeared in a new role. With an unexpected request, he turned to two key figures in his entourage, Madame and the Duke. His words, spoken calmly and confidently, sounded to them like a thunderclap. Aslan expressed his desire to marry. This revelation caused a real shock. After all, until that moment, Aslan had seemed steadfast in his refusal of all marriage proposals, which made him an almost asexual figure in the eyes of the court, aloof from worldly cares and aspirations. His sudden decision to marry, and moreover to a girl of unknown family named Roel, was so unexpected that Madame and the Duke could not conceal their amazement and bewilderment. The questions came one after another, but when Aslan with unshakable confidence called the name of his bride-to-be, everything froze in the air. Roel, a name which until that moment had meant little to the highest circles, was now the subject of discussion, speculation, and even excitement. Why had Aslan, who had always seemed beyond the reach of worldly passions, chosen her? What unknown connection could exist between them? The Duke, relying on his position and authority, immediately exercised his veto power. His decision was firm and adamant. In his eyes, such a union was unacceptable, for he could not allow such an important figure as Aslan to marry a girl about whom nothing was known. This decision by the Duke not only heightened already existing tensions, but also challenged the very foundations of traditional ideas about marriage and unions in their society. The moment Aslan, overcoming all internal barriers and limitations, knelt down in front of his parents, the atmosphere in the room was so tense you could have heard a needle drop. This gesture, carrying so much despair and hope at the same time, stunned his parents to the core. All their ideas about their son, his character and intentions were instantly overturned. Aslan, who had always seemed to them a symbol of strength and intransigence, now stood before them humble and vulnerable, which was their final argument in favor of his desire. The parents, faced with such an unexpected manifestation of their son's deep feelings, could not remain indifferent. Their hearts were touched, and despite all doubts and fears, they decided to support him. However, their agreement was not unconditional. They set Aslan a task that seemed almost impossible. He had to track down and stop all those who were sowing discord and disorder in the border zone. This condition was a test of his resolve and ability, a test in the face of which many would have retreated. But Aslan, inspired by his ambition and the support of his parents, accepted the challenge without hesitation. With extraordinary determination and skill, he set about the task, displaying his best qualities as a leader and strategist. His actions were so efficient and quick that a task that normally took 3 months to complete was accomplished in just 1. This feat not only proved his undoubted ability, but also showed everyone that his decision to marry Roel was not a whim of the moment, but a deliberate and serious decision behind his words and actions. Thus, Aslan not only won the right to marry Roel, but also strengthened his reputation as a man capable of great deeds to achieve his goals. This episode was a clear testament to his character, determination, and ability to overcome any obstacle on the way to his dream. In a secluded room where everything seemed imbued with silence and expectation, Roel found a refuge from the outside world, a place to be alone with her thoughts and experiences. Wrapped in the soft light that barely filtered through the curtains, she pondered her recent interaction with the Duke, gripped by anxiety and doubt. Roel could not rid herself of the thought that she had made a less than favorable impression on the Duke, that his favor with her was threatened. The thought of possible banishment from his home captivated her completely, causing her heart to beat at an accelerated rhythm. Seeking solace and understanding, Roel looked at her diary, the faithful companion and guardian of her innermost thoughts. Looking at it, she tried to find the answers that seemed so unattainable. She was filled with fear, not only of possible rejection by the Duke, but also of a future that could be far more bleak if the truth about her origins came to light. After all, if the Hickerelis learned that she is merely the Viscount's adopted daughter, their decision on her fate could be made even more quickly and ruthlessly. Immersed in her own thoughts and unable to find a way out of her maelstrom of fears, Roel jumped when she heard the door of the room open, and Danyan appeared in the doorway. His appearance was unexpected, but at the same time it carried some relief. There was determination and a certain urgency in his voice as he relayed the news from the Duke, who demanded Roel's presence in his office. This news swept through the room like a whirlwind, making the girl shudder with a mixture of excitement and anticipation.